Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Marie Stella, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of fashion. There are a myriad of options circulating as to which brands are most sustainable, how damaging fast fashion really is, and what we should be looking for when shopping for new clothes. Dr. Elaine Ritch joins us today to shed some light on what might be a confusing topic. Elaine is a reader in fashion, marketing, and sustainability at Glasgow Caledonian University. She has made significant contributions to the sustainable fashion literature over the last decade and has adopted novel methodologies to explore consumer perceptions, including with young children as they reflect on eco-school activities. Elaine is also a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. She leads the research group Consumer Lifestyles and Experiences and teaches new perspectives in critical marketing and consumer society. Elaine has co-edited 4 academic textbooks related to fashion, marketing, and sustainability, published her research in international journals, and presented her work at international conferences. Her approach to research and teaching is very much driven by the Common Weal, Scots for Common Good, and the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals. So, welcome to the show, Elaine. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for asking me.
No worries. So before we jump into our topic, can you tell us a bit about your background and what compelled you to pursue your studies in fashion?
Yes, so I've been interested in fashion since I was a young child, watching programs on TV about the 60s in London, and it just seemed really exciting and vibrant. And coupled with the music and lifestyle changes at that time, that was all very appealing to me. And I've always liked to draw and make clothes, and knit, even when I was very young. And so the interest in fashion has always been there. But observing, I guess, the changes in the fashion industry and the shift away from unique style and innovation in the mass market to what really is cheap and basic clothing compelled me to look further at the issues around sustainability and how we can address this shift in behaviour and look to encourage people to think more creatively about the clothes that they wear.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. I would never have thought, a lot of companies these days, they're always shifting towards innovation and towards authenticity. And it seems like this industry is doing the opposite. So that's interesting. Hopefully we can, talk some more about that.
I think one of the ironic things is that sustainability is such a buzzword. It's, in a sense, it's become quite diluted and hijacked by other perceptions. But if it's a trend, then it feels to me like the fashion industry is not really embracing that trend.
Wow. And what would you say is a common misconception about fast fashion?
I think a lot of fast fashion brands use the terminology around sustainability and in a way that encourages people to think that their consumption is okay. But actually, it doesn't have any substance. It's not particularly meaningful. So, for example, if a fast fashion brand is encouraging people to be sustainable by buying new clothes and giving them a voucher to buy more, then that's not really addressing the core issues.
No, that seems a bit hypocritical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's all an amazing introduction to our topic today. And we are going to get into some deeper questions to explore that. But before we go into that, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better as a person. So this is our segment, Have You Met Elaine? So, first of all, what do you like to do in your spare time?
I enjoy reading. I still enjoy being creative and making things for myself, for others, for our home. Um, I enjoy seeing friends and I enjoy being out in nature as well, and swimming.
Amazing. And do you have a book, or you mentioned reading there, so maybe a book or maybe a movie that you've enjoyed recently?
Um, I don't, during the semester, I don't tend to read much for pleasure. I save them all up for my holiday. Um, so I have a list of things that I'm working my way through for a holiday packing. But I did watch Mickey 17 recently at the cinema and I thought that was really interesting.
Amazing. And do you listen to podcasts? Are there any that are your favorites at the moment?
I don't tend to listen to podcasts. I did recently listen to one about culture in the UK and the US, and that was really interesting, but I've forgotten what it was called.
That's okay. My next question for you is, do you have a role model? Now, this could either be in your personal or professional life.
I don't have a specific role model, but since working in academia, it's, I've been touched by how many women have been very supportive and encouraging. And every university that I've worked for, there have been these women that have reached out, particularly when you're an emerging academic and perhaps have young children, to understand that other women are able to make a success of it and are willing to provide you with that support to continue has been really heartwarming. And so, if anyone's been a role model, it's for me to try and emulate that back onto the next generation.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that story. That encouragement and support is beautiful. And my next question for you, sort of speaking of university, is there a class or a course that you've taken that has inspired you? Or maybe if you've taught one that has inspired you?
I have, yes. But I'm really lucky that I teach new perspectives in critical marketing and consumer society. And I really do appreciate the autonomy that I have to do research, my own research, to read other people's research, and to really observe what's happening in wider society and marketing, and to try and bring that to my students in a co-created way that encourages them to have discussions with me. And I learn, it's a co-created space where I learn from them, they learn from me. And I do appreciate that not everyone has that level of autonomy to pursue what's really interesting to them. And the module evolves every year because society changes every year, marketing changes. And so that keeps me interested in that topic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it when a university subject moves along with the times and discusses the most innovative research. It's really fun to discuss in class because sometimes those kind of things might have come up in the media as well that you've seen recently, and we can often discuss. I mean, I'm not at university anymore, unfortunately, because I did love doing that. So that's great to hear. So I'd now like to move on to some of our questions for the interview today. And we'd like to start off by just defining some of the terms that might come up. So, for starters, how would you define affluence?
I guess for me, affluence is the collection of goods, the accumulation of goods, material commodities that we use to try to bring ourselves happiness or to communicate our status to others.
Yeah, wow, that's a really cool definition, actually. And secondly, for our discussion today, what is fast fashion?
So, fast fashion emerged around the mid 1990s, and it was in response to changing innovation and technology for manufacturing. And businesses wanted to apply a quick response to catch those consumer trends of what was selling well, to maximize profit and minimize waste. So, good intentions behind that. But what's happened now is that that acceleration has expanded. We now have ultra fast fashion from brands like Shein and Temu, and clothing is now being stimulated to encourage us to buy. So we're not necessarily buying with autonomy, but we're buying what those changing fashions are bringing to us. And everything's speeded up. Supply chain speeded up, the excavation of scarce resources, intensive labor practices, everything is accelerated with this trigger for us to consume, because the fast fashion profits come from accelerated sales as opposed to anything else. So it's a whole machinery behind a supply chain that is really for us, for planned obsolescence, for us to buy without really any effort to think about how long we're going to have something for, or even indeed how much we love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you confirm for me what you mean when you say we're not buying with autonomy?
I think a lot of fast fashion and the way that it's marketed to us is all about the stimulation to buy without really thinking it through. So, not thinking through how does this fit with my current wardrobe? Where will I wear it? A lot of it's just to encourage that impulsive behavior with flash sales, free delivery for a limited time. Other people are looking at it, so it might not be available when you want it. There are all those tactics behind the communication of the marketing that mean that we're not necessarily thinking through, is this something that represents me? Can I see myself wearing that for a long time? It's about triggering impulsive and frequent consumption.
Okay, that makes sense. And so now, how would you say that the relationship between fast fashion and affluence is like?
I kind of conceptualize this as being a bit more about us wanting to present self much more
Mm.
widely. And to an extent, social media plays a role within that. So, for example, during the pandemic, an organization in New York got in touch with me, and they had a rental model called Wardrobe. It's no longer functioning, but we captured this in a case study, myself and Dr. Noreen Siddiqui from the University of Glasgow. And what they did was they rented celebrity clothing. So, clothing that had been seen on TV shows or in celebrity wardrobes, catwalk shows, red carpets. Um, and they rented it out to consumers for quite an inexpensive cost for a couple of days. And during the pandemic, their sales soared because Generation Z were renting this fashion, taking photographs of themselves in their living rooms and posting on social media and becoming part of a co-created group of sharing those kind of images. And to me, that represents affluence in a sense that I'm, buying into consumer or celebrity culture to demonstrate those products that I've purchased. Um, and this, of course, is more sustainable because they're not actually buying the clothes. So there's not all the scarce resources behind the making of it and the intensive labour. And they're also not disposing it to landfill. But it is a demonstration, I think, of us wanting to highlight our sense of self, our status, and to join in with the kind of celebrity culture, which is quite buoyant within society just now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard of people doing that, but I can definitely imagine it happening. And so, on the other hand, what is slow fashion?
Slow fashion, I guess, is a bit more like fashion that would have been around pre fast fashion. So if you think about traditional fashion designer catwalk shows, there would have been a lot of preparation, and there still is, that goes behind the scenes of that. There would be preparation of thinking about what materials, what colours, looking to innovate within the materials. So, for example, Isaac Miyake and his pleating, or John Galliano and the dissecting of patterns and and creating them or constructing them in a much different way. The design inspiration behind a collection that would take months to prepare, and they would have people experts in dressmaking and pattern cutting looking to make the clothes fit really well, be creative and innovative in the styling of them. And the clothes would have a lasting appeal. They'd be made to be worn for decades. And if you think about the kind of clothes that you can buy in charity shops that come from those kind of places, then they are made with to last and to be worn numerous times by numerous people potentially. So it's clothing that's had that thought and care from the design inception right through to the construction of it and the finishing of it that that can last. In contrast, fast fashion isn't made to be worn more than a few times. The seams don't sit well, buttons often pop off, and funnily enough, people don't always repair those buttons, which are really simple. They would dispose of them. And the material's really thin as well. So often it would go into holes really quickly. And I have noticed that myself, that the clothes that I've bought pre kind of 1990, I mean, I still have a pair of boots from Miss Selfridge that I bought in 1993 that I still wear, and I still can wear them because they were built in a different way. And so that kind of comparison of the longevity of a garment, I guess, is the difference between slow and fast fashion.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that as well, where some of the fast fashion brands, the materials seem a lot more plasticky and they don't feel as nice. And then, of course, they don't last as long. So I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking that. And then, of course, you have to get rid of it eventually. And you think, well, this isn't even good enough anymore to donate to a charity shop. It can't be worn again by another person. So it's just creating waste. So yeah, that seems to happen a lot now, I think, where people find that they're burning through clothes a lot more quickly. So I'd like to dive a bit more deeper into how people do go about buying clothes. What thought processes do you think people typically go through when they're buying new fashion?
I think that very much depends on the consumer. There are consumers who are triggered by the fast fashion marketing. Um, and because some of the research that we've done, we've realized that social media really does play a strong role in this. So if something is present, and I mean, our participants in research have said things like social media is in your face. It's the first thing I reach for in the morning when I wake up. So they're very much involved in this space, which is they're being sold things all of the time. One of the quotes that sticks with me from the research that we did was someone saying that they bought a pair of white Air Force um, Nikes because everyone was wearing them and they already had a couple of pairs of white trainers, but it was the brand specifically because they saw them everywhere. So there's this sense of I need to present myself as being fashionable and on trend. And if this is what everyone's wearing, then I need to access that as well. So I think a lot of the triggers for consumption for people that perhaps are still to find their individual and unique style comes from social media, and fast fashion marketing plays a prevalent role within that. But I think there are other consumers and some consumers prefer to create a capsule wardrobe and they would think about each piece individually as making the whole within that. Or some people have a distinct style that they would want to search for the right, say, coat, the right color, the right style, the right materials. And that search, that hunt would be part of the fun of the process. So I think it does very much depend on the consumer and their personality and how confident they feel in their styling abilities. And maybe even age comes into that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like that finding your own new unique style is quite important because if you if you don't, you might find yourself falling into the trends and needing to fit in. But if you feel really comfortable within your own style, it can mean that you buy less often because you need to find the right thing to fit in. I find this happens sometimes with musicians because I'm in that sphere quite a lot with musicians and artists who need to present themselves online as having quite a steady, similar aesthetic so that people recognize them, so they become recognizable. And so that probably helps people to justify buying something more expensive every now and then rather than buying cheaply, which is my next question for you. Why do you think people do struggle to justify buying more expensive clothing?
Simply the cost. Um, I think because prices have eroded so significantly that it's shifted our benchmark of what's acceptable to pay for. And even a few pounds can make that differential perception in what that is that they're consuming. So that shift has meant that it's more of an effort to think about paying more. It's not necessarily more of an effort, but perhaps impacts on their disposable income more. If you can get it cheaply, then I guess why not? And of course, we're very consumer centric when we're buying things. We're only really thinking about our own needs and our own finances. We're not thinking supply chain management, people who made this, where the materials came from. So I think that that's probably one of the drivers for it. And of course, we're living in a cost of living crisis. Again, wages haven't gone up as much as prices for other goods, such as energy and housing. So if people can make savings, then they will. And also, a lot of people, when they're buying, are thinking about the short-term perspective and not the long term. What will I be wearing in 10 years or 5 years even? And another impact, of course, is families. Children go through clothes quickly. They're always growing, needing new or damaging their clothing through play. So therefore, it makes sense to pay less if you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find myself thinking this all the time where I go into a shop and I see, I mean, I don't wear jeans that often, but for example, a pair of jeans, and I think, well, I just bought some jeans in a charity shop for half this price. So maybe I should look at trying to thrift something first, before I go to the big stores or the big fast fashion brands that can be cheap as well, but maybe not even as cheap as something that's pre-owned in some circumstances that I've found myself in. So
Actually, a lot of our research has found that people think that charity shopping or secondhand shopping is more expensive than fast fashion. So again, that's another deterrent.
yeah, that's true. I think it depends where you go. I found that some charity shops here are quite upmarket in a way, and they're like quite popular ones that all the, trendy people go to. Let's say it like that. But there are definitely still some steals in other ones. So it definitely depends. But I
Absolutely.
do agree with you. Yeah. They can be quite
No,
expensive sometimes.
they can, but there are some steals, and I think the hunt is what appeals to some people. That searching for it, it's almost like it was meant to be for me.
Yeah, that's true. I love the hunt and I love making it a social activity. Like my friends and I were always saying, oh, we're going to go shopping, but we're going to go thrifting because that's kind of become, I mean, in my circles, it's a sustainable thing to do. And that's actually quite trendy for us personally, I find. And it's good fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So can you tell us a bit about why fast fashion is actually more expensive, even though the prices might seem cheap?
Well, there's a hidden expense for the planet, um, and it's cheap because people haven't been paid sufficiently. Even in the UK, laws can be manipulated. So it's cheap for us as consumers, and it's profitable for the retailers, but it's expensive for the environment and for the garment workers, who are often the most vulnerable people in our society, who don't have autonomy and choice to obtain other work. So there's that aspect, but also you'll need to keep on buying fast fashion. It's going to be a consistent resource that you pay for. Whereas if you think about garments, cost per wear, then paying more if you can wear it more often. Ultimately, if you love it as well, then you will want to wear it more often. Then it is a bit more cost efficient from that perspective. If you buy better as well, you can perhaps sell it on when you no longer want it because it maintains some kind of value that other people may want to wear it. And it's made so that it can be worn again also. And of course, it's not impacting on economies in other countries. For example, the amount of clothes that we discard in the UK, a lot of it ends up infiltrating into African markets where it displaces indigenous and local markets, but also it clogs up the environment. It's found in if you think about the plastics in the sea and the clothing that washes up on beaches, we simply have way too much than we can cope with.
Yeah, there's definitely that feeling of too much, and that there's too much than what we actually need, which is just causing waste because people might not be thrifting, going to charity shops as often, because we may as well just get cheap fast fashion. You know, if it's cheap, then
Exactly. So
yeah.
it was interesting during COVID. Our research found that people had looked at their wardrobes and they'd continued to buy during COVID online. And
Mm.
that shifted a whole behavior to more online shopping than people did previously. Because online fashion did struggle in the beginning because people preferred that social aspect, the touching, the feeling, and the trying on. But during COVID, it really did accelerate. And we found that some of our participants had gone to their wardrobe and found that they were buying repeated styles because they were not looking at their wardrobe. They were just looking at social media and thinking, I need that. A lot of this fashion still had the labels on and had never been worn. And they looked at it accumulatively and said, that actually could have paid for a holiday, or I could have put that money towards a deposit on a property. So it's that kind of way in which we're triggered to buy something, but we're not really thinking about our wardrobes as a whole. We did find that the participants that considered their wardrobe as a whole tended to curate it a little bit more closely. And it was almost like an extension of themselves, that when they thought about their style and what would add to their style rather than detract from it. And that was really interesting as well.
I really like this. It's kind of heading back towards the finding your own personal style that we were talking about before. If people are going out to the shops without looking at their wardrobe and buying something that they already have, then clearly that's something that you love and that should be invested in a really good quality item of that. And then finding your style. That's kind of a silver lining of COVID, that people were able to look at their wardrobes because they were at home and think, what's actually in here? I've got time to maybe clean this out and see what I do and don't like. That's really cool.
Yes.
Absolutely. So can you tell me a bit about why you think fast fashion for so many people is so addictive?
I think it's addictive because social media is so omnipresent in our worlds. And there's that constant trigger to buy and that need to be seen to be fashionable in the same way that other people are. Historically, the addiction to buy fashion or commodities was linked to consumer pathologies. And it was considered as a psychological behavior in which people were seeking to make themselves feel better, improve their self esteem, indicate a certain social status, almost like a fantasy land of celebrity culture or someone who's important within society. Whereas now it has become normal. It doesn't have such an impact on our incomes, whereas historically it would have had an income and people would have accrued debt often to maintain that kind of lifestyle. Whereas it's much more accessible now and normalized, that it's considered to be unusual that people would not buy that frequently, particularly with younger people who've grown up in that social media world. We
Mm,
also have social media exposing fashion hauls and larger consumption purchases and the regularity of that. If you think about unboxing and being donated a haul and the unpacking and that level of hedonism that's experienced in that. And I think going back to hedonism, that's a really important issue. Our research found that people were more excited waiting on the whatever it was they've purchased arriving. There was that level of anticipation. This is going to change my life. I'm going to look amazing within that. Once they had it, they were much less excited by it. But it was that kind of promise of the good life almost that we've been sold through consumer culture.
Yep, I can relate to that feeling like there's a package coming and it's so
Yeah.
exciting. I mean, to be honest, for me, I don't order online very often. So if there's a package coming, that's crazy. There's never a package coming for me, but that's really interesting. Definitely a theme of social pressure happening throughout this episode so far, I think.
Yes, it's absolutely. And that comes through in the research as well, not just the research that we do, but others as well. But where does the pressure come from? Because I don't see us judging one another so much. I mean, perhaps that's not the cohort in which I move, but
Maybe.
yeah, it's interesting that I'm not sure where the pressure is coming from, but the pressure is definitely there.
Yeah, maybe it's a pressure on people that they're putting on themselves because they want to be more like someone else, or they see someone and they make the judgment of, oh, that person's cooler than me or richer than me and has more like commodities than I do, has more clothing items than I do, and I should be like that. That's
Mhm.
interesting too. Moving on now to when we are actually shopping, what should we consider when assessing the quality of a clothing item?
Well, as consumers, we do look for quick routes to buy things and to understand them. So it's always good, I think, in advance to understand the business from which you're buying something, what their supply chain is like, how transparent it is, whether they've got any eco accreditations, how they treat the people within that. There's a lot of rhetoric around, say, gender equality and modern day slavery and sustainability issues. So, really checking that quite carefully and thinking about the integrity of the organization for your brand. New research that we're working on just now has seen us interview people from small sustainable brands in the UK. And one of the participants was telling me that he was quite interested in having some of his garments made from recycled polyester. And so he spoke to a factory in China, and I'm not criticizing outsourcing or Chinese factories specifically. But what was interesting from this example is that he asked for something to be made in recycled polyester, and the person sighed. And he said, "Is there a problem with that?" And she said, "Well, not really, but I don't know if you know, but we actually make the plastic bottles in the factory next door. So we can make the recycled plastic. So we might think that we're doing a good thing by buying recycled plastic because we're making use of the resources already in existence. But actually, for some, it's just another tactic because they don't have the consumer waste to make the recycled plastic. So they're using new materials, new sources of plastic to make that. So understanding the supply chain is definitely beneficial. But ultimately, it's much better to buy what's already out there and to make use of renting fashion, even everyday fashion rather than special occasion fashion or designer fashion, and also buying into the redistribution market, both buying and selling.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you mentioned they're trying to find out about the business and how transparent they are. Are there any resources you would recommend people using to find the best brands?
There are resources. And it's probably better to look for something within the locality of where you live to understand what's going on. And all localities are really different. We were in Berlin a few years ago with the students, and they did a green fashion tour, and they took us around more sustainable brands. And it was interesting because in the shop there was the designer, there was people in the back of the shop actually making your clothes. So Fashion Revolution asks us who make our clothes. There they were in the back room of the shop, and you could see the conditions within they were working, and you could have a conversation with them. And I know that there's similar operations of collectives that highlight sustainable alternatives within each locality in Europe and the UK. So looking to see what conversations other people are having. And again, what's really interesting is our research has found that people who do buy into the sustainability agenda use that same platform of social media to connect with others of a like mind, and also to learn about new brands that they may want to buy from, and to engage with the secondhand market. So the platform of social media, on the one hand, might be considered as being problematic for encouraging fast fashion and frequent impulsive consumption, but it can also be that route to being more sustainable too.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so earlier on in the episode, we were talking about how the online environment, especially, really pressures us to buy quickly when websites might say only two left or already in three people's baskets or whatever it happens to say. How can we change our mindset when we're shopping to ensure we make the best decision for ourselves and the environment, of course, and stay calm in this somewhat panicked environment?
Well, that sense of urgency doesn't normally last, that kind of level of hedonism. So I would say don't respond to that trigger to be impulsive, but to perhaps think about it. If, say, 48 hours later you still wanted it, then yes, maybe it is the purchase for you. But also, some brands do this, but more brands, more fashion brands could adopt uh, the ability for consumers to return those clothing and for them to be available on a platform. So that although something, maybe there's only five left, but there's the potential to buy it secondhand on another platform. Um, so we could be making the most of those kind of technology and innovation to connect consumers to particular types of clothing.
Interesting. Now, I think we already spoke about this, but because the term is in your own research, I do want to cover it as well. Can you tell us about what social capital means and the role that this plays in fast fashion?
Social capital is how we present ourselves to others. It's not a new ideology. It's, if you think about 500 years ago, the ways in which the aristocracy would communicate their status and that hierarchy of rankings within society of what class people belong to. And we signal that to others. And fashion is a signifier of who we are, what we're about, um, and how we want others to see us. It can be symbolic of the music that we like, the kind of lifestyle, the political ideology. It represents all of those things. And so the social capital is we're presenting our social self or the aspects that we want others to see much more widely in society. Um, and it becomes part of our persona.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And it definitely ties into what we were talking about before with the social pressure of maybe trying to look like someone else who you think is maybe in a higher class than you or more trendy than you or that kind of thing. Interesting. So, in terms of actual wardrobe advice, if you've got any for us, do you have wardrobe staples that you believe everyone should have?
I guess, a pair of jeans,
Hmm.
um, layers, I guess basics
Mm,
that people would want. I think,
good answers.
buying something that's not necessarily on trend, but is a bit more stylish, that you can style with other things, that's got longevity in the way in which you can wear it, dressing it up, dressing it down, is made well, fits well, and makes you feel good. To me, is the answer to that.
Yeah. Oh, something that you can dress up and dress down is amazing. I have found so much success with that kind of thing. I've got a summer dress, which probably was fast fashion. I'm not sure actually. It's lasted quite well. I've worn it a lot and it has served me in many different circumstances. So that was definitely worth buying. Hopefully, it wasn't too fast fashion. I actually don't even remember where I got it. So that goes to show how long it's lasted anyway.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to move on now to our practices and habits section. And my question for you here is what habit would you recommend practicing when it comes to fashion shopping?
I think it's nice to take others with you to get opinions, and to discuss it a bit more closely. Um, and to not feel that sense of urgency. Sometimes having a conversation with someone else where you're wondering the potential that it might have can reduce that level of urgency. And because fashion is a social communicator, that, to speak to your audience, I think is quite useful. But also invest more in the kind of hunt, the seeing it more, if shopping has become a leisure activity, then make it leisureful. And like you say, you go with your friends, you go thrifting, you look at things, and you see a wider variety of options rather than what's being pushed on you through fast fashion marketing. So I think as well about the way that it's made. You can feel the quality of good clothing. You can feel that the materials feel weightier, softer, perhaps nicer. Checking the construction of it. So I think seeing the fashion more as a working piece rather than a visual piece is quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were saying there about being able to see a wider variety of options, of course, if you go in person, but if a friend is coming with you, they're going to want to go to different shops than you're going to want to go to. And so you just get to see everything depending on how much time you have, which I find is really helpful as well.
It is helpful, and it also opens you up to different alternative means of consuming. It might take you to new shops that you'd never experienced before.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. I love going shopping with my friend. And sometimes I'm the one talking one of my best friends down from buying something that I think, are you going to wear this a lot? Are you actually? That's very, you know, sometimes we have more impulsive friends than others. And it's good to balance each other out and have a real conversation about what you need.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I'd like to move on now to our open mic segment. This is your chance to talk about anything you're passionate about. It doesn't even have to be related to what we've talked about so far. Anything you'd like to promote, the floor is yours.
Yes. For me, one of the things that irks me about the fast fashion industry is that aspect of design and the level of creativity and innovation that goes into something, the investment in the creation. And the process, the design process of how it's evolved from one thing to become another. When you think about people playing around with patterns and try to think about different ways of putting something, an item together, they're looking back to the past and borrowing from previous trends and they're pulling it forward. And decades had symbolism that were representative not just of fashion, but also of society at that time and what other experiences were happening. And we seem to have lost all of that through fast fashion, which is continuously evolving. And there doesn't seem to be any distinctive style within society. But mostly I'm annoyed that a lot of the designers who invest that time in their creativity and that design process often have their designs stolen by the fast fashion industry and replicated and made more cheaply. And they're not credited for the work that they do, particularly financially. And of course, when their goods are set aside the fast fashion replica, which is much cheaper, that's going to sell much better. So it for me, I think it's unfortunate that the processes have been eroded for the sake of profit, and that erosion has also other negative consequences upon people and labour. Uh, the manipulation of people's psychologies to encourage frequent fast consumption, and also of the climate crisis within which we're experiencing just now. That whole process, the acceleration of that is hugely damaging. But also, I think one of the things that we need to recognise is the theft of intellectual property and that level of creativity.
Yeah, amazing things to share with us on this episode. Thank you. As I alluded to earlier, I'm in some quite creative musician and artist spaces, maybe less on the visual arts sort of textile side like we've been talking about, but definitely know what you mean when you're talking about people who've spent so much time and effort in designing something, creating something, and then it gets stolen or it gets starts training an AI to make music or something like that. So I know what you mean about that, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think it's important for people to be aware of that. People should be credited for the work that they're making, at least.
Absolutely. And buying from an independent designer is their livelihood.
Yes,
It is
exactly.
what sustains them, and it allows them to live and have levels of autonomy. When you're buying into fast fashion, you're making a rich man richer, generally. So, for example, the Inditex owner is often cited as being the second richest person in the world. So having a think about where your money is going and what you're investing in, and are you supporting your local economy, or are you supporting the global economy and increasing inequalities?
Yeah, that's a very strong message to send, and to show people that, maybe we want to be investing in our own economies and in our local people who are your friends, probably, who are making something and trying to make their livelihoods. It's really interesting stuff. Thank you so much, by the way, for coming on our show today and sharing all of this wisdom. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do from this episode, where can they go?
Well, I have links on the Glasgow Caledonian University website that takes you into some of the work that we've published. So that's and also the 4 textbooks as well. There's some of our work is published within that.
Amazing. I'll put some links in our show notes to where people can find you and your work so that they can look into it further, because this has been, for me especially, a really interesting episode. I've definitely learned some things that I didn't know about before. So I'm going to conclude our episode now. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at affluence.lifemanagementsciencelabs.com, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.